Welcome, everyone. We are excited to have you today to join our km4dev Knowledge Cafe, organized by km4dev, Tacitous, and also together with the Real Care magazine. So we have today our colleagues, all Atsu has been behind the scene to make sure that things are in order and to have this wonderful knowledge cafe. We have our colleagues, Jordan and Darius, who are going to share with us. I would like to welcome Jordan and Darius to introduce themselves and then share with us about what is this big thing about the knowledge driven for sustainable development and also growth. And if you're the first time joining us today, welcome to km4dev community. It's a global community of practice who are members interested in international development and also with local development to support you and to learn together on how we can create sustainable growth and development in regard to knowledge management. The membership is free and we welcome all members to join us. This through the D group, km4dev D group. So my colleague Paul is going to share with us in the chat more about the km4dev. So I would like to hand over now to my colleague Jordan to introduce yourself and then Tyrus.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to start with a slide. So let me know when it kicks in, because if you only got one screen, you're seeing that screen. So Darius, let me know, please. Yeah. 1 second. I'm just going to share the screen and get right back to the beginning. We're going to have a bit of history. Share the screen. Here we are. Darius, tell me when you can see.
Yes, I can see a slide. I hope everyone else can.
Hello, everyone. So today's presentation is Knowledge Driven for Development and Sustainable Growth, empowering innovation and collaborative growth across the continent. We've been given 30 minutes, so we've got quite a lot to cover because we thought we'd got an hour. But our point is, if you want to talk to us afterwards, just contact us. The whole point is that we're here to talk. We want to collaborate. And I think one of the great things about the km4dev community is that I've worked all around the world for different oil companies, and the energy that we're getting from Paul and Gladys and everyone on this group, I've actually told other people about it. I think it's the one group that's actually growing, and it's growing in a wonderful way. I didn't get this energy when I lived in the Middle East, and I didn't get this energy in Kazakhstan. And I think that's one of the growth areas. I do really think that there's a lot going on there. So without further ado, first slide. My name is Jordan Richards. I class myself as a technologist because I've been involved with implementing SharePoint information management. I've written quite a few books, including books on blockchain, on AI. And one of my passions is KM. And I've been working in oil and gas previously to running Tacitous for about 20 years with multiple companies from Exxon, Shell, and every single time I've worked for an oil company, they've rewritten a knowledge management platform for each company. Every single time after time after time. And that has been a very interesting thing for me because I've had to talk with people like yourselves and build some technology to support and enable you. And I decided from that, let's build a platform that makes it an easy on-ramp. And we're going to show you that. But with me today is my good friend, and what I class as one of the best people in the world when it comes to lessons learned. I didn't have a very robust opinion of lessons learned until I met Darius. We met on Twitter, funnily enough. And Darius really knows about lesson learned. And he used to be the head of KM for a very famous company called Rolls-Royce. You know Rolls-Royce, and you know that Rolls-Royce is quality. Whatever they do it with quality, whether it's jet engines to keep you safe, whether it's very expensive cars. KM has enabled them to keep that level of quality because it's a pathway to expertise. I think Darius has got 25 years experience. Is it 25, Darius?
Coming up to 24, almost, yeah.
All right, say 25.
Not quite quarter of a century, but almost, yeah.
And he's a lovely person. Darius is in Thailand at the moment. He pops across to Malaysia to see me. I'm in Malaysia, and we're available to help anyone. Just talk to us. That's what I want to give back to the community, that we're trying to make the best KM platform out there. And we're going to show you some forms and stuff. But if you've got other ideas, just talk to us. You see, we're a real person. I'm not a salesperson. I'm a technologist, as you can tell from my animation in my face. So this is the agenda. Darius, do you want to take that? What I will interject is at the bottom, we've got some, I did some research about sustainable development, and I've always tried to put something with a source material to back it up, because without source materials, anyone can make figures up. I don't want hallucination. I want real source material. So go on, Darius.
Thank you, Jordan. This is what I'm going to be talking about in the next 10-15 minutes before I hand it back to Jordan to say for a real world example. So as Jordan said, there's way too much to cover in such a short time. So if you've got any questions, message me in the chat or drop us an email afterwards. Always happy to help. So I'm coming up to, in 3 weeks' time, would it be the 24th anniversary when I started at Rolls-Royce Knowledge Management Center. And since then, I've had the privilege of helping companies and organizations all over the world. And 24 years later, I still love knowledge management, still very passionate about it, because I can see it makes a difference. Not just making a difference to organizations and businesses and the bottom line, but actually making a difference in people's lives, and that's something you can't beat. So I'm going to be talking about what knowledge is, where it resides, mostly in people, which is the next bullet, some of the problems that can occur if you don't manage knowledge well, and then some of the knowledge management tools and techniques that I've been using for the last 2 decades. They're not all of them are IT based. You can use a lot, which is pen and paper, flip charts, or whatever tools are available. Then on to the benefits, and then Jordan, I'll be handing over to Jordan to see so you can see some of the solutions as well. And I believe we've got some time after our presentation for questions. Okay, thanks, Jordan. Next. So you could go into a long academic debate about what knowledge is, and you could talk about words like tacit and explicit, and then go on to ontologies and so on. But when you're talking to most people, that they tend to switch off. For me, knowledge is what you miss the most when the experts aren't there. Next, please, John. And knowledge is what makes an organizational work well, and the lack of it and the lack of sharing of knowledge is what can make an organization fail. And knowledge could be seen like a genie that's had real untapped potential, that it resides within your people, and if it's not brought out and if it's not shared, you're not making the most of what is really unique and special about your organization. Next, please. One time I was walking around with quite a large office block in Rolls-Royce, and it was late at night, and I was thinking just to myself, this is how my brain works, what knowledge is left in this office building? There are hundreds of rooms and thousands of filing cabinets, but what is the actual knowledge that resides in this building? It got me thinking that knowledge more often than not resides in people rather than on servers or in Word documents or in dusty filing cabinets. Next.
Can I just interject there, Darius? So
sure,
I think that's a very important point, that I know a lot of you are all asking about AI, and I wrote a book on AI. And I think that there's a very point there that knowledge is in people. And that's why I think knowledge management is going to be a massive growth area, because it's a continuation of the knowledge economy. And it's not word prediction soup. It's the fact of, as Darius said, that when everyone leaves a building, where's the knowledge? It's not repositories of files in a filing cabinet. I think it's a very interesting concept, and it's very important. Sorry, Darius, I'm just interjecting.
No, that's great. Thanks. Yes, there are tools and techniques that you can use to extract or bring out and share knowledge, and which I'll briefly cover today. But you can't completely replace people with AI chatbots and so on just yet. It might be possible in the future. Okay, next, please. So so where does the knowledge reside? And that's something that you need to think about. And that's something that can be formalized in a structured knowledge audit, which I'll mention later when I talk about some of the KM tools. And it's not just about identifying what knowledge you need to run your organization or your business, but where does it reside and how at risk is it in terms of how many people know about it and whether those people are at risk of retiring or passing away or being snapped up by the competition or moving to a rival organization or another company. Next. It probably doesn't, you don't need me to tell you some of the problems that can arise as a result of not sharing knowledge. And there are a few, which we'll briefly talk about. Next. One of the big ones, and I've noticed it's becoming more of a problem, particularly during and after COVID, is the continuity of expertise. So too many organizations are relying on one or two key experts that if they were to get ill, fall under the proverbial bus, or move to another organization or retire early, that a lot of companies are finding that it's a big problem. And I've noticed this since COVID, where people are becoming more used to working from home and don't like working back in the office, that the length of time that people are staying in organizations and companies is shortening. Back in my father's day, and you know, someone would stay in an engineering company for 30 to 35 years, and I've worked with one engineering company, a world famous one, with thousands of people working there. I was just about to say thousands of employees. 80% of their workforce were contractors with critical know-how that does result in safety problems. 80% in contractors. And when people are contractors, the workforce is very fluid and dynamic. And also, people are retiring earlier than before or becoming self-employed contractors themselves. And knowledge is more at risk than I think ever before. And I've certainly noticed an increase in business the last few years. Thanks, Jordan.
Just to interject there, we've just done a presentation to Petroleum Development Oman about critical knowledge retention and retirees. And I think that's very, very important because everywhere people are retiring, PDO, who I used to work for, I've gone back to present to them about this. They've lost a load of workforce who are people who are retired, and they've realized that there's no pathway to expertise. And I think that's retirees. It's not just the fact that they get given a watch and they say goodbye. You're losing all that experience gone. Really, there should be a way to engage with the retirees. We can do that as another presentation, how to engage with retirees so they are the subject matter expert to train the next generation. So it's a learning organization. We've done an entire presentation on that to Petroleum Development Oman, but it's very important because one thing is that older people want to feel appreciated, and feeling appreciated is very important. When you leave a company, if you've been 35 years as the head of contracting or the head of cybersecurity, you want to feel you've got all this experience and it's just gone. You know, there should be a way to actually engage with these post-retirement or post-leaving. It's something that we're dealing with at the moment, and we can present about that in another time. But it's something we're very, very passionate about. And we're actually writing a lot about to fix that problem. So sorry, Darius. Yeah.
Yeah. In so many organizations I've worked with, the only formal exit procedure is usually something to do with HR, where it's a 1 hour possibly exit interview. And there's a checklist. Have you handed back your pass? Have you handed back your laptop? Blah, blah, blah. There's not so much a formal process of, okay, this person's about to retire. What can the organization do to try and capture all those lessons and learn they've built up, all those nuggets of knowledge and useful tidbits of knowledge that they've got. Yeah, 20 years ago, almost to the day, I was very proud to be invited to speak at Harvard University. And now I met the head of knowledge management for NASA. And she approached me and said, oh, we've heard about your knowledge acquisition techniques, which I'll go on to in a minute. We need to, the president has said that we need to return to the moon and we need to capture knowledge from the Apollo engineers, you know, the moon landing programs from the 1960s and the early 70s, and trying to apply those knowledge from landing on the moon and the whole program management and apply it to the Return to the Moon program. And I was like blown away. So yeah, don't leave it too late. You know, if you know someone's getting old, or you know someone's about to retire, or there's high turnover of people in your organization, don't leave it too late. Because this next slide is one of the biggest costs of not managing knowledge well and not learning from lessons is the repeated mistakes. Of course, you can repeat past successes from capturing and sharing your knowledge well, but more often than not, the biggest problem is, of course, repeated mistakes. Next, please, Jordan. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to briefly talk about some of the tools and techniques I've been using over the last 20 odd years. Next. Starting with a definition of what knowledge management is and lessons learned, capturing critical know-how, community practice, peer assist, and something I mentioned earlier, knowledge auditing. So without further ado, because I'm aware of the time. Okay, the next slide, and if you click through, thanks, Jordan. This is not what I use when I talk about knowledge management in organizations. I rarely use words like ontology, metadata, taxonomies, all this sort of things, or show diagrams like this. I find it doesn't work. To me, knowledge management is trying to capture and share what you miss the most when your experts aren't there, and also trying to capture and share lessons learned. And that what it is in a nutshell. And even with all this amazing technology and our software and apps that we've got, that hasn't really changed in all the time that I've been doing this. Thanks.
I think that's pretty key. I think there's been a push for too many years, and I've been in oil and gas where money was never an object. And the idea is gone too academic and not actually talking about conversations, communications, and communities of practice. It's actually about people. It's people, process, and technology. Technology is an enabler, but it's people and process. And I think that's very key. Them diagrams just make me want to go there. And I'm an information management person. So yeah.
I love diagrams and stuff like this, but not when I'm trying to explain what knowledge management is. Lessons learned, again, I'm pushed for time. So this is all about capturing and sharing when you've done an activity, a project, or a program, what's gone well, why, how you can repeat those successes, what could have gone better, why, and how you can avoid those mistakes again. And this could be captured in the lessons learned review, which you could do on your own, or you can do with and I have done multi-billion-dollar programs with, close to 100 people in the room sometimes, because, you can capture your own lessons learned and also not just capture them, but put those lessons in a way that can best be shared with others, or even if you can repeat your own successes in the form of a checklist or procedure or process based on what's gone well and what could have gone better. I could talk for hours about lessons learned alone, but if you just look up lessons learned review or after action review, that's a simple non-IT dependent tool that you can use to manage knowledge a bit better. And I've conducted and helped with hundreds of these over the years, and it's one of the most simplest and most powerful knowledge management tools, and it can be done with pen and paper. But IT is one of the best ways to share it, but we'll talk about that in a sec. Thanks, Jordan. Trying to capture and share critical knowledge is something we've done with something called the knowledge acquisition process. Again, sorry, we don't have time to go into it in detail, but we can tell you more about it, and I've written articles that are publicly available on it. But in Rolls-Royce, we developed a process to train graduates, apprentices, and new starts to the organization on knowledge acquisition tools and techniques. So they would be under the knowledge management wing, under my wing, for 3 months as part of their learning process. And we would teach them knowledge management tools and techniques to capture and to spend time with the experts and try to capture, as I said, what you miss the most when the experts aren't there. So their illicit knowledge, how they go about solving problems, how they can design something new based on what they've done before, and so on. And we trialed this out. It actually started in Rolls-Royce before I started in the mid-90s, and it became part of the learning process that all graduates and apprentices in certain areas of the company had to do knowledge acquisition projects. And that's one way of capturing you know, the most critical know-how. Thanks, Jordan. And here are some KM tools that we found to be useful over the years. Communities of practice, a structured way of sharing knowledge about particular disciplines or areas of knowledge, and in a structured way across the whole organization. Peer assists about trying to get people who've done something similar to what you've done, you want to do, and learning from them in a structured way. Knowledge auditing is a way of, as I mentioned, trying to identify what knowledge is at risk. So you can do a sort of a map of the knowledge topics that you need to be able to do something within an organization, and traffic light it in terms of how important it is, how many other people know about it, those that do know about it, how at risk it is, and how easy it is to capture and share that knowledge. And you can have a visual traffic lighted chart of critical know-how within a department or a project, and the last tool here is one of the most powerful, one of the most longest going knowledge management tools in history: storytelling. Particularly in this day and age where we're inundated with messages and Slack messages and too much information and social media and so on, storytelling as a way of sharing what went well, what could have gone better, how to go about doing a particular activity or project, is one of the most powerful ways of sharing knowledge. And I've even been involved in video storytelling, even before things like YouTube and TikTok were even invented, and also putting processes and procedures actually in the form of cartoons as a way of more readily showing how to do a particular process, particularly with people who don't speak English so well, or whatever it is the language of the organization, which Jordan will cover briefly in his bit. Thanks, Jordan. So there are plenty of benefits for KM. I'm going to whiz through these because of time. So if you just skip through these very quickly, please, Jordan. I was going to talk about some case studies, but there's something you can Google, and I wouldn't, to be honest, I wouldn't have been doing this for 24 years unless I could prove or show that it does have.
Darius, it's all right because people are still joining now anyway. So
oh gosh, I thought we only had 30 minutes. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yes, there are plenty of examples where not just millions of dollars have been saved by not repeating mistakes, but also speeding up processes, speeding up learning, speeding up innovation and development, getting people to be more useful to the department a lot quicker by accelerating their learning, and so on. Thanks. And knowledge management has been shown to improve operational efficiency, and you can use knowledge management not just to save money, but also to make money. If you're in an NGO or not-for-profit, you're probably thinking about money, or making money is not so important, but certainly saving money is critical, because way too much money and resources and time are wasted by not managing knowledge effectively and not learning from our own mistakes. Thanks. And you can use knowledge management to boost your own projects, to boost your own development by just learning from your own lessons, also encouraging something like a lessons learned review when you've completed a project with your team. Conduct a small or after action review, and then talk about how we're going to capture those lessons and share them so that we don't make the same mistakes again, or we do repeat the success. And it could be in the form of improving your processes, your procedures, creating simple checklists, or even just recording what you've done so you can pass on a recording of your lessons learned to the next person.
But I think that's got to be implemented in your processes, your company management system, your organizational management system. So you, going back to the idea of people, process, and technology, the people out there are going to be implementing KM and championing KM is everyone here. And you've got to help organizations implement the processes so they become a learning organization. So that's the key line, because if they don't have it, if they don't have any way to capture that knowledge before they leave, or any way to capture lessons learned or retention of critical knowledge, then it's not a learning organization. When people leave, when people shut the door, that's it, it's gone. It's the process. They're using your skills to build the process. And that's nothing that you can outsource. You can't go to fiverr.com and get someone to do that. So
yeah,
next.
thanks. This to me is probably one of the main reasons why I do it, other than I know it's helping people, is reducing risk, particularly in the area of health and safety and medicine, and so on. Because it is painful to see when people suffer because of lessons not being learned. I know they could suffer psychologically in their business, but I know of cases where people have suffered mental health problems. They've become injured as well, physically injured, and that has an impact on them and their pain, and also their family and their earnings. But also people have died as a result of not learning from lessons and not managing knowledge well, and that still hurts. And so, you know, we try to do what we can to help. Yeah, and I've worked with, you know, I was very fortunate that I started my knowledge management career in Rolls-Royce, where quality was paramount, because if an aircraft engine fails, you know, people can die. And then I, you know, helped organizations like BAE Systems and Airbus and other aircraft manufacturers. And then I went on to helping the National Health Service in Britain, which runs the hospitals and health service. And when you see mistakes being repeated and people dying and children suffering, it is heartbreaking. And that's what, you know, I'm still passionate about what we do. Thanks, John. So, sorry, it's been such a very quick tour of some knowledge management tools and techniques, but as I said, just give us a shout afterwards or in chat and we'd be happy to tell you more about it. But we're going to talk about, I've talked about some problems and the people and so on, but Jordan's going to talk about some solutions and how that can work. So thanks, over to you, Jordan. Cheers.
So this is the solutions. So as I mentioned, I've been implementing KM, and I first heard of KM when I was in Kazakhstan and Italy, and people have got problems and said, what do we do, like with lessons learned, or how do we build this? And I've had to build this. And I think that if anything's static, it's probably dead. It's static, it can't bend. So if you spot something, I'm willing to listen, really, because I've tried to come up with what is a blueprint. Technology is built upon a blueprint, and what is a blueprint for helping people deliver KM? And to go to that, if I have to say to you, I want a little story about, I want you to imagine, everyone here, that tomorrow a government department or an NGO comes to you and says, we like this idea of knowledge management. We like all the conversation about it. Can you come and help us? And this has actually happened to people I know, where they've gone to Dubai Aviation, and they've gone there and they've got all these ideas about people, process, and technology, but they don't have the tools. What do they need to make it work? Besides the people in the process, what is an enabler of this? Because as far as I can see, there is no easy on-ramp for KM. If you had to go to someone tomorrow that you didn't know, you said, I can help you become a learning organization so that when someone leaves, new joiners, new graduates can get benefit from their knowledge, and we've got pathways to expertise in different languages. I think that to enable that, where do you go? I mean, what do you use? Do you use an Excel spreadsheet? Well, sorry, that's not good enough. Do you use SharePoint? I know about SharePoint. I was actually at the launch of SharePoint. I go back over 24 years in SharePoint. And if you want it on premise where you are, whichever organization you want it on premise, you're looking at millions of dollars. The database licenses alone are $500,000. It's $250,000 per server, and you may need more than one. And every time I've worked for an oil and gas company, they've done it from scratch, and they've built it on top of SharePoint, on top of SAP, and it's cost millions of dollars. And every time they've had to redo it. And so what are the barriers as a KM person? What are your barriers to implementing KM? If you went to an NGO for, one of my friends is a former Minister of the Environment for Kazakhstan, Myra, and she's opening up an NGO in Kazakhstan. And what's the barriers? I mean, one of the barriers is cost, one of the barriers is technology, and one of the barriers is language. And I was thinking, how can we do something? How can we do that better? So way I see it is there's people, there's process. So the people is you, the champions, the people who are learning and knowing and showing the business value and the value proposition of knowledge management. And then technology is an enabler. Can KM exist without technology? Absolutely. You could write it down on a piece of paper, and people have been using storytelling for years, but it makes it a lot easier. If you can write it down and codify that knowledge in a way that the next person can use, then it's a benefit. So when I think about how KM enables collaboration, what is it really? Going back to what Darius said, you've got people. People are colleagues, are the cornerstone of any business. Business is not the bricks and mortar. The business is the people. Knowing more about the people around you in your organization so you can connect with them, what their role is, what their skills, what their experience, what their interests, that is a building block for KM, people. And when you know people and when you know what their experience is, you're having conversations with them, you're building relationships, you're building trust. And that leads to people collaborating. We like one of my friends, Stephanie Barnes, she always talks about meeting people by the water cooler. And where you meet someone by the water cooler, you have a conversation, you say, oh, I know someone who can help you with that. That's how you collaborate. And to give you an example, my wife is Kazakh. She speaks Kazakh and Russian and Italian. And when I was in PDO, they had a contract come in from a Kazakhstan company for some part of well engineering, and no one could read it. And on my profile on our KM system, we had the fact that I can actually speak some Kazakh, and they contacted me because of that, and they managed to solve the problem. So this collaboration makes things better, which enables us to build communities. And that community could be sustainability, it could be HSE. HSE is always very important. It could be just as simple as a knowledge management community. It could be simple as a HR community. It could be simple as how do we encourage entrepreneurs in Kenya? It could be whatever the community. We can build communities based upon people collaborating together to build communities. And them communities, you could say, well, that's a good conversation. That's a lessons learned. That's a best practice. And you should be able to promote a discussion to a best practice. And that leads to improvement, innovation, and knowledge retention. So based upon all this, and this is what's happened in various oil companies, again and again, completely different oil companies, a lot of them don't like each other. I would say that from what I've seen of the blueprint, the technology side of KM is people, it's communities, communities of practice, communities of discipline. It's learnings, like learning from experience, and then it's collaborative talks or knowledge cafes. In construction, they call it toolbox talks, but it's the same thing. So these are the building blocks of the technology to enable KM. And behind that, we've got, well, what is a people? We've got profiles, you've got skills, you've got ask me about, you've got communities, news feeds, tags, mentions, and then you've got communities, which is threads, posts, best answers, announcements, files, knowledge base. Knowledge base is a point of contention for me because I have talked to people and they say, we don't need KM, we've got a knowledge base. And I'm like, no, that's a frequently asked questions. That's not knowledge management. And I think that a lot of companies have stolen the narrative about what you guys do. Knowledge management is not a knowledge base. A frequently asked questions on a service desk is not knowledge management. It can be part of it, but it's a small part of it. And then we've got learnings, learnings and best practice. I think my screen's kind of a bit funny. Knowledge preservation, reduce risk, and enhance decision making, because people say that lessons learned helps enhance decision making, continuous improvement, and expertise. And then I'm very passionate about people leaving the workforce and retirees. It's something that's almost like a mission for me, maybe because I'm getting old, which is critical knowledge retention, which is if you get the people who are retiring to be a subject matter expert on a community of practice, and any question that's tagged with their subject matter expertise, they get a notification saying, by the way, someone's asked a question about visas, or someone's asked a question about fundraising, and they, even though they're outside the organization, can actually monitor this and steer the conversation. That leads to a virtuous circle where the new people can do something with that. It's cultural preservation, it's risk mitigation. I think it's a wonderful thing. And then finally, we've got knowledge cafes. I have got a discussion going on about knowledge cafes because I think if you do have a knowledge cafe, some of the conversations should be written down and codified so other people can learn from it. It shouldn't just be a static repository. And What ties this all together is a knowledge search. So you could search for HSC and find anything with people, communities, learnings, knowledge cafes, what has got HSC, what's got oil and gas, what's got a stuck wellhead. And then there's something that I would like your feedback on, the idea that there's a lot of forms out there for KM, and we've tried to put ones in there that are useful, but there's other ones. Just talk to us. You've seen that we're real people, and we're willing to talk to any of your organizations. We'll talk to you. Just let us know. We're going to have a virtual coffee with you. What we've got is cloud-based, and it's a mobile application, but what we find is that's an easy on-ramp, because if you wanted to build SharePoint and you wanted to build a KM system where you are, it would cost you millions of dollars. And I found that a barrier. So what I've said to, like, for instance, the Dubai Aviation is, look, get this, you can get this up and running in about 2 weeks. And then if you want it on premise, we can build it on your SAP, we can build it on your SharePoint, but we give the tools to prove, the knowledge management people can prove that it works, that KM actually works and brings business value. So it's cloud-based, but it's also could be built on on-premise. This is the screenshots. This is what it looks like. I'm going to show you anyway, but I think I want to show you something that's very important to do with languages, because I don't want languages to be a barrier. So there's a web-based client. It's running in your browser. And there's also a mobile app, which we have mobile apps tailored to, for instance, lessons learned or community practice, specific mobile apps, not one fits all. And there's an enterprise version. But what's quite important, I think, is the ability to translate it on the fly to different languages. For instance, as you can see there, that's Swahili. Kula kama simekazi kama kuku. It's something I learned from my friends when I was in Oman. And the idea that not everyone speaks the best level of English or whatever language you pick. And I found this in Oman, that in an oil and gas company, you've probably got 8,000 direct hires, and you've probably got 80 to 100,000 contractors from every nation on this earth. And if you can make their understanding of what are lessons learned, or their understanding of a community of practice, or how to solve a problem available, translation is never going to be 100% perfect, but at least it gives them that step forward. And I think it's very important to be able to have it translating on the fly. I think it's a win-win. So I'm just going to actually show you. I'm just going to go right there. I'm actually going to show you. And there we are. Signing in. This is, I'm not going to show you my password. This is the actual, you've seen the idea that we've got people, communities, lessons learned, and knowledge cafes. This is the system. Again, we've got people. It's built upon that blueprint. So if I say all people, there's all the people. And I can go and click on Jane Whiteman, who's a wonderful person, very good KM person. And I can see what she does. I can see what skills she's got. And I can click on that, and it takes me to a search. So if I click on knowledge management, it'll take me for anything to do with knowledge management. I can see she's a member of 3 communities: sustainability, knowledge management, artificial intelligence, and neurodiversity. She's actually a moderator on neurodiversity, and she's a moderator on knowledge management. But that's only part of it. You've also got the idea of the blogs. But what I think is quite interesting is, if we just take that and we say, okay, why not change it to this language? Why don't we see what's happened here? Yeah. The language is very key. I want more people to access that knowledge. I don't want language to be a barrier. So we're trying to make a system that works for people out there who are not knowledge managers. So if, for instance, if I go, for instance, I'm not going to speak Scottish Gaelic. If I go, for instance, Swahili, there we are, in Swahili. And if I only know a few words, Mambo. I only know a few words, so don't criticize me on it. I'm trying. And so I told you the idea that we got the idea from people. And I should go back to the blueprint again, just to show you people. And then I'm going to go back and say, well, we've done the people. We can find people. We've also got the idea of communities of practice. For instance, sustainability, neurodiversity, knowledge management, different communities of practice, depending on what the organization is. What's interesting is, I notice, if you can see here, there's a little icon, because some communities of practice, it's just one massive list of questions. From an information management point of view, I don't like that. I like to say, well, if it's HR, we should have one section for pensions, one section for employee benefits, and then all the questions on there. I like the findability of information. I don't like one big list, but some people prefer that way. So there's two ways of looking at the information. So for instance, if I go, for instance, into neurodiversity, there's all the questions. And I don't think a community practice is just questions. I think it's more than that. It's, for instance, group announcements. Again, I can change it into Swahili, or I'm not Swahili, and it translates on the fly. I don't know how good the translation is, but it's better than not having it. Let's be honest. It's calendars, it's events, it's files, it's frequent questions, it's libraries. And then this is about the community. I can see what it's about, this little thing there, and I can say, who's the members of this community? Who's the leaders? Who's the community coordinators? Can I follow them? So whenever they post something, I get a notification about this. Who's the experts? Because you should apply an SME to any community, and who's the actual members? That's communities. Going back, we've got the idea of learnings, very important. If I go for lessons learned, because to some organizations, KM is just about lessons learned. You've got to appreciate that KM is different things to different people. We're just trying to build a one-stop shop for everything. So for instance, lessons learned. So lessons learned, for instance, this is the lessons learned. Yeah, you can filter it whichever way you want. You can see by category, environmental, commercial, startups, neurodiversity, whatever. And I can go into any particular learning, and I can see like this was put by Mark Brown on this date. So 25 people look at it. I can go in integrated neurodiversity for advanced workplace, click on it. And I can see all the information about that learning, who's created it, what keywords, description, background, recommendation. It's there. It's out the box, built in. I'm trying to build the toolbox for a KM person to go and implement KM in any organization. To go back to one of the questions that I'd like from you is, we've got this thing called forms. And I think that there's a whole collection of forms that are useful to all you. For instance, critical knowledge assessment, after action reviews, innovation ideas, knowledge cafe form. I'll just show you the knowledge capture and retention, which is whenever anyone's leaving, if for instance, the finance director or the HSE person's leaving, I want to have a form where it says, okay, what's your name? What's your managed keywords? And then tell me about your job. Please describe in your area, in layman's terms, understandable by someone who isn't an expert in your subject, who would be new to the role. And then conversation points. Now, you could say, well, why don't we just use AI to generate this? But I think the value proposition of all KM is it needs a KM qualified person to sit with a finance director and say, I want to tease that and discover that information from you. It's not something you can predict with word soup. So, for instance, what do you wish you'd have known when you started the job? Any success factors for achieving success on the job? And all these critical knowledge retention, this is quite standard forms about the entire KM field, but these can change. The changes you made while you're doing your job, any shortcuts or workarounds, and this should be recorded for anyone inside the organization. So the next person joining it can read about their role and look at the shortcuts. So it makes it easier for everyone. And again, as always, I do think that the fact that having it as different languages is vitally important. So that is the knowledge forms, and there's more forms there. We've got other ones, for instance, knowledge cafe. We've got critical knowledge assessment, like is the work continuing, yes or no? Yes. Is there a successor? No. Is it fully documented? No. Is it critical knowledge? Yes. Does anyone else have the knowledge? No. Then I priority knowledge. A significant portion of the organization knowledge and expertise is not owned by the organization, and there's a pathway to this. No. Anyway, that is Tacitous as a quick one. My point is that if you want to talk about it, we're willing to talk. The more organizations that use it, the better. And if you're a charity or an NGO, talk to us, because I need people to use it. My goal is oil and gas, and I want to get more people using it to make it better. So just go forwards. And why we're doing this? Well, one of them is I do think there's a block to if you had to go anywhere and you say, I want to implement KM, you won't have there's a barrier to implementing KM from a technical point of view. And this enables you to have a quick on-ramp. It's leveraging standard tools like knowledge cafes, it's communities of practice, lessons learned. Them standard tools, we've already built them. They're built and they work. We've got a blueprint that's been running for 20 years and slowly evolving. Like, for instance, the language things, we're trying to make it better all the time. You can get up and running with a KM site as long as you've got a KM person. This does not work on its own. There's no way, I think, that you could ever implement Tacitous without a KM champion. You've got to have someone who understands the value of a learning organization. Otherwise, it's pointless. Whoever has it without a KM person won't use it. I've seen it happen. You need a KM champion. And finally, when people say, okay, we like this, we've done a proof of concept, we like it, but we want it hosted in Ghana, we want it hosted in Dubai, then we can look at bringing it on premise and writing it around the organizational structure. So that's the what we've got, and that's why me and Darius are trying to make things better. We're willing to talk to all of you, really. We really are. Darius? Are you still there?
Yes, yes. That's
okay.
So somebody mentioned in the chat about the importance of conversations, and
yeah,
we're well up for that. So yeah, and one thing you mentioned about the forms to capture knowledge from retirees.
Yeah.
I've been involved in hundreds of knowledge acquisition projects with thousands of experts, and one of the things we have learned is asking the expert to document their own know-how before they retire. It's not always the best policy, because what would be very common sense or the basics or obvious to them isn't to other people. So that's why we've trained other people to spend time with the expert and interview them in a certain way and ask certain questions to get that those nuggets of knowledge out and best shared. And
that's quite critical.
Thank you
Go on.
very much. Thank you very much, Jordan. And then Darius, I think that was really, really very exciting session. So at this moment, we'll just like participant, if you have a question, you can just just unmute yourself, and then you ask your questions in that perspective, so that the expert will be able to share that aspect with you as well. And then we have I think we have a couple of minutes, so we will just give ourselves at least 3 minutes, 4 minutes to ask questions, anything that you wanted to do. I know Jordan and Darius are available at any given time. So it's a moment for question now. I see a lot of questions when one of the participants is asking about how do you, as an organization, how do you integrate these solutions into an organization who's bound on the Microsoft perspective? How do we integrate that in an organization who are,
I'll go to the question in a second. I'll go to the question in a second.
Yeah.
Just as a freebie for everyone, we've got a site with a white belt learning. There's a white belt for lessons learned, and it's absolutely free for everyone. Give it out in your organization. It's completely utterly free. The book's free and the course is free. And if you do the exam and pass, the certificate can be shared on LinkedIn. So completely utterly free. But for everyone here today, if you use the km4dev YLF as a coupon code, the green belt's absolutely free as well. It's just our gift back to everyone. And just as a feedback thing, you can get a white belt and a green belt. All the course materials on there, all the books on there. And if you use km4dev YLF, the green belt's absolutely free. We can share these afterwards, but I'm just going to go back to stop sharing so I can see your faces. So anyway, now to questions. Yes.
There's a question about its compatibility with Microsoft, and then I'll go on to the one about HR from Ninez. Okay. Yeah. So the question was from Katie: how well does this integrate with Microsoft products? Speaking from an organization that is bound to Microsoft, as almost all of the people I come across are.
Well, where I was previously, every single oil company has built it upon SharePoint, and that was a barrier because you'd have to spend millions building it. I know from the licensing alone, my history goes right back to beta on SharePoint, and these stuff can be implemented inside SharePoint. SharePoint's got what you're really talking about is a platform called SharePoint. Now, SharePoint can either be hosted on the cloud in Germany or whichever country, or you can have it on premise inside your offices. It gets quite expensive. And the reason why it gets expensive is they say that, okay, you got Office 365 license, but then if you want to use workflows, oh, that's extra. That's another $24 a month. Oh, you want to use forms? Oh, that's another $24 per user across the entire Active Directory. This can be implemented in SharePoint, but that was not our focus. Our focus was to give a tool that doesn't cost so much so you can do a quick on-ramp. Then, for instance, Dubai Aviation are talking about, can we rebuild it on premise? Because a lot of people like government bodies want it on premise so they can control it. But it's all built upon the blueprint, and the blueprint can be implemented in many different ways. Next question.
There was a question from Nina's asked, since this involves retirement and those leaving, what's HR's role here? Back in the UK, I've actually given quite a lot of talks to the CIPD, which is the Institute, the National UK Institute for HR. And it's getting HR people informed about knowledge acquisition and the knowledge acquisition process and what you can do with experts retiring. And I've been involved in organizations where we looked at all the demographics. So how old are the employees, how many are coming up to retirement, or how many mentioned retirement, and doing a knowledge audit to work out which is the knowledge that is most at risk, because you can't go about trying to capture knowledge from everybody. So you really have to identify what's key. So in the past, I've worked with HR and KM, I've worked like this for it to be really successful. And one of the other organizations you've got to work well with is finance and showing the financial benefit of doing KM, particularly in businesses rather than not-for-profits. Victoria asked, can we have a session on how to make the interview? I presume that's a knowledge acquisition interview. Yeah. Well, that's up to the facilitators here, but I have written articles about that going into a bit more depth.
Yeah, this is a long-term relationship where we really like the energy of this group, and we want to continue helping this group. So I only say things very plainly, and sometimes, because I'm a technologist, not a salesperson, and sometimes I say too much, but I really feel from talking to other people and other groups that are very static and very academic, I think that the energy here is absolutely wonderful. So we see this as a long-term relationship. So we want to come back. Someone's asked a question about retirees, and I would really like to share that presentation we did to PDL, maybe remove their logo, and show you what we was talking about with retirees, because I think it's interesting from an HR and how to engage with people who are outside the workforce, and how their expertise can be brought in as a pathway to them. So yeah,
because it's an issue that is only going to get worse because of aging populations. People are having fewer children, and that is going to be affected. It could be noticed in the workforce with more people retiring than young people joining, and that's going to have profound impact on learning and knowledge sharing.
Yeah. I'm going to share the PDF with Gladys and Paul, so you can have access to the PDF with our email. If you need us to talk to your organization, just talk to us. We're more than willing to see how we can help. My goal is to make this the one-stop shop that you could go somewhere. People leave, people change. You suddenly be made head of KM. I want to be an enabler, and I want to be the best enabler. So I'm willing to listen. Really, really. Your feedback helps me. So yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Jordan. And then, on behalf of km4dev, Knowledge Cafe Core Group, especially Sarah, and then on the behalf of, the km4dev Young Leaders Forum, which is an initiative to more empowering other young people to take the challenge and champion knowledge management in their various space. We are really, really glad for this opportunity, and Jordan and Darius for sharing this amazing for us. And then we urge each and everyone, if you're interested, just connect to Jordan either on Twitter or wherever it is, and then you can have amazing conversation with him in the perspectives. As they mentioned, knowledge is about the people, is about sharing. And then the key for us is continue sharing whatever we have so that we can continue to be a champion and we can be enablers within our ecosystem that keep us going. But more importantly, KM to be successful, we need to be champion of the KM. That's the key word from Jordan. So wherever you find yourself, you need to be, that champion, that particular champion of a KM, so that we can have a very wonderful session. But before we go, we just want each and everyone to turn your video. Gladys will take a picture, we need it. It's part of the knowledge retention. So we just want to practice that today. So please, Gladys, if you are there, just each and everyone, please turn on your video. We just want to have that quick picture, and then we can move on. Gladys, if you are there, we are building knowledge retention, which is part of us, critical for us. Yeah, so please.
Well, okay,
yeah,
wait,
so
before we do that, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate this opportunity of us like having a photo. We appreciate. Feel free to rename where you're joining from, like put your country name. You know, we appreciate and we are grateful about that. So just to rename, I'm putting my Gladys Kenya or from Kenya. Yeah. So that we make sure that we are all represented and all our countries are well represented. Wonderful. Right. Doing this screenshot now. You want to smile?
Are you there? Darius, are you there?
Right.
Okay, that's fine. But anyway, we also urge each and everyone, at any given time, you can connect to each and everyone within our social media platform, as well as, KM4D community of practice open to everyone. At any given time. So connect to Gladys or myself, and then we can make it happen. And thank you so much. Let's do conversations. Yeah. So we appreciate your time. Okay, yeah. Your time and everything. But remember, we are going to share this the slide and then the recording later on. So thank you so much.
So don't talk to us if you want. If you contact us on LinkedIn, and we're willing to help. Honestly,
completely confusing. We're not letting out the spare room, as we call it. Is that's not really. Sorry, we hardly use this website. I should explain, because we now go through an agency. So the website hasn't been updated for some years, so